This podcast is brought to you by Trivelo Coaching, where we help triathletes and cyclists like you train smarter to race faster. I'm your host, Jordan Donnelly, and on my left is former Australian Ironman Champion and head coach of Trivelo Coaching, Gerard Donnelly. Dad, I want to start this episode by talking about something really interesting that happened last week. We have an athlete as part of the Trivelo family that you started coaching him back in 1987, 1988, around that era. And basically, you've been doing this thing a long time. And this was evident when we discovered some old handwritten training programs that you had written for this athlete and others in that period. And this athlete is Banger Harvey. He still proudly rocks the Trivelo kit and racewear at the Trivelo races, and still races at a very good level at his age group level. And it was just pretty fascinating for us when we were talking about the fact that we think about all the modern day data and training programs, and here we have like old scriptures, handwritten notes of sessions and intervals, and you kind of had a notebook where you'd drawn out with a ruler the calendar week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and on each day written the swim splits and the cycling paces and goals of the session, and there was no data to look at, so it was really interesting to see how you'd written this out back then, and it was a funny reality check for us for how long you've been doing this.
Yeah, and how difficult it was to actually monitor and analyse progress. So that was one of the more difficult things. Obviously, not having computers weren't invented in that period, so there's no such thing as a laptop. We didn't have a mobile phone, so the only form of communication was to write out the training program on a bit of paper and then put it in a letter and send it to the athlete. And that sounds pretty amazing, but that's actually what we did. And if we wanted to speak, we would call each other after hours at home just using a landline because nobody had mobile phones then. So you couldn't email the program because you could just mail the program, which is a similar thing, but there's a little bit of a lag time between an email that gets sent in 1 second and a letter that gets sent. And in those days, it could have taken 3 or 4 days to get to the right address. And the descriptions of what to do. I know that Banger put this on Facebook a while back. He actually took a photo of he kept one of my week's training programs, and trying to be descriptive about what we wanted to do in his bike session and his ride session and his swim session. A lot of it was based on effort and heart rate and checking speeds on the bike. So if you were doing a loop on a certain circuit, there was a circuit called it was around the football stadium here called it was called VFL Park in the old days, and we would do laps around that, and that was a pretty constant circuit where it was about 2k around, and we could measure how your form was going by how quick you could do those laps. So we were using all these forms of methods of analysis that we're trying to work our way to understand if we were getting improvement. But yeah, it was a kind of a bit of a reality check to understand how easy it is now to really find out about where you are at any given point. And I always laugh at people when they kind of scoff at too much testing. It's if we had testing back in those days where we could actually see progress, it would be you give them a Nobel Prize because it's like, far out, we can actually work out where you are this week. Whereas we had to wait for races to find out, where you were against the rest of the field. And that's perspective, isn't it? If you go train with a bunch that on a Saturday, you might be top of the bunch and, someone, or you end up not riding so well on that day, you're not finishing the bunch strong, you get perspective there and then that you're not going so well. Or if you're normally getting dropped by the bunch and all of a sudden you can now keep up with the bunch that are all similar consistency in their levels, that's perspective of, geez, I'm improving without even any data, You're getting this feedback from non-structured data. It's more, the group of people that you're used to racing against, you see at a park run. So these are the things that we used to do when we had not a lot of information, and it was great. And I had, I was only 30 yet, 31 or 32, and I just had this passion for helping others, and there was no finance in it for me. These guys needed help, and I remember I had two other guys who were just as keen. They were a lot older than Banger, but Banger was, he's still in the top 3 in his age group, and he's been doing this a long time, and he really learnt how to train properly back then. And obviously our training has evolved and improved, our methods, our understanding of exercise physiology, understanding of what works for athletes and what doesn't, and treating each individual athlete as an individual rather than throwing just one program at everybody. We've learnt all of that since 1980, which is literally 45 years ago, when I first started helping some athletes. And I remember getting taken out to dinner at one of the most expensive restaurants in Melbourne by two of the guys who wanted to thank me for coaching them. And, because we didn't have any payment system, so they just took us to a really expensive restaurant, which was, and I suppose that's kind of a good introduction for what we want to talk about today. And gratitude is one of those things where I just love helping people, and that's kind of built into me. Is if I see someone struggling with their program and they're not improving, I just want to help them. And I can't help it because you get quite upset that I'm helping people outside of the range. And I suppose this is what we do with this podcast. It's a great way for you and I to get messages across for people who can't actually be on the program.
Yeah, that's spot on. And I do laugh at the notion of, you write a program and potentially mail it to the athlete, which we would be horrified now if that was the case, because we have the ability to, and we're grateful for the ability on Training Peaks for an athlete to wake up in the morning and something happened and we change the session, and you send the program by letter for the next month, and we couldn't even imagine having a month's program advance with what about all the changes that you need for the program. So, I guess the point is you've been doing this a long time, 35, 37 plus years, and you've seen a lot in this sport. And so, in today's episode, we're going to explore what makes a difference in habits with the highest performing athletes that you've seen over your time. But as always, we'll go through our normal segments of the podcast, and that we start with our gratitude. So what are you grateful for this week?
Well, I do say this occasionally. I just love the gratitude section that you and I discussed 4 years ago to have as part of our podcast. And I just think that passing it forward, and that's kind of what gratitude is if you're trying to be a reasonable person, a reasonable human in this world whilst you're here, and if you can show great gratitude for people who are helping you, I think that's a win. And so on the weekend we had, we have lots of races every weekend, and there's some races that are particularly important. There's some races that are special, and I think I got a real sense of athlete gratitude back towards us, and I think that's my gratitude this week. Is I'm grateful for the athletes showing gratitude back towards us as a training group. The Trivello family is a very small little family in the scheme of the world, but certainly we have really, I think, instilled in our athletes the sense that it's not all about me. It's about what can we do to help others. And I love the gratitude coming back from our athletes who performed so well. We just did a podcast on one of the events, the Peaks event, and some of the messaging that I got back about our coaches had me in tears. Really, the athletes were just so grateful to be associated with Trivello and just couldn't thank me enough for allowing them to join our program, and the results they were getting would not happen without the understanding of what our coaches have in relation to what the requirements are for each athlete, and they were literally on leaving voice messages that were pretty emotional. I sent some of them to you, and it really makes you feel really happy, and makes it worthwhile doing a job like this, because you're just getting so much satisfaction back. And that's not what you're doing it for, but it is occasionally. That's what I'm grateful for. Occasionally it does come back, and I love it. It's great.
Yeah, my gratitude is also actually for our Trivello coaches. And it's funny, when we do the gratitudes, we both write ours separately and then come together in the episode and do it. And for our coaches, we have for Trivello, we have a high standard of coaching, and we just say to our coaches, we can teach you our system and our programming, and of course all that stuff is very important to get right. But the one thing that you have to have that we can't teach is the same level of care for our athletes that we have, and yeah, we just had some great feedback over the last week after some great race results. And the feedback was what you're saying. The messaging is all the same across the board. And so I'm so grateful for our coaches for the job that they do and looking after all of our athletes. We really appreciate it. So again, if you'd like to show your own gratitude for the show, you can help our ranking by subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast and leave a 5-star review. And a huge thank you to everyone who did so after the last episode. We did see your ratings. We do see them and we really appreciate you. So thank you for taking the time to do that. Now, before we get into the episode, just a quick shout out and welcome to the newest members of the Trivello coaching family. These athletes have all jumped on board with the hopes of improving their results. And the athletes are Sam from Victoria, Sam Ford, Daniel Lewis, also from Victoria, Lee Rasty, who's been part of the Trivello family a long time, but has fully come on board as a one-on-one personalized athlete, Vincent Pautonier, and I apologize for my French pronunciation of that, from Switzerland, Vincent, Jackson Chapman over in Western Australia, Isabella Casey from Melbourne, and Matt Ryan from New South Wales. We can't wait to help you all improve on your journey. And if you'd like to join these athletes and guarantee your own improvement, you can go to our website, travellocoaching.com.au. As a reminder, we coach athletes from all over the country and all around the world. Now, a quick time for our mailbag. We do like to just answer random questions that we get asked anywhere we get asked them, just because we just find these questions do help with some quick tips that triathletes out there might be struggling with. And just a reminder, we don't know your entire situation, your training history, so we're going to give very generalized advice based on these questions. But this one came from Kieran, and he said, "Hey, Trivello, I've been listening to your most recent podcast, and you constantly mention the need to run off the bike." I'm glad you're listening, Kieran. Being someone who struggles to keep my heart rate down post-swim and onto the bike, which is most people, is this something that should be practiced in training? Big fans of what you do and would love to sign up with you one day. Thanks, Kieran. Your quick thoughts on this, Dad?
Yeah, we would, in our programming, put swim bike if it was practical, logistically. And for most people who have a job 9 to 5, to go to the pool at maybe 5 a.m. and then get on the bike at 6:30, 6:45 wouldn't give them enough time to get to work. So that is the only reason why we don't schedule swim bike sessions. But if we had the time to do it, we would. Mainly because you have to travel. It's different doing a bike run. You can actually have the bike in your house and you don't have to travel 20 minutes to the pool or 15 minutes or 30 minutes there and back. So there's an hour travel or 40 minutes travel. You're just eliminating that. So it's not an exercise physiology reason why we don't programming it a lot. But if you had that facility on a weekend, and you're really struggling with controlling your heart rate, it is a good thing to do to go for a swim and then jump on the bike. And we would encourage that. But logistically, because not many people have access to a pool like they have access to an indoor trainer, and possibly when they get off the trainer, they could just go out the door and run 15 minutes around their local housing area. Or they could just jump straight off the indoor trainer, straight onto, if they're lucky enough, indoor treadmill. And there is no commute time for those. That's why it's time efficient. So, in actual theory, yes, it's a great question. We should be doing that. We should be getting used to the feeling of what it feels like to swim and then jumping out of the pool or the water or whatever it is and jumping on the bike. And that brings me to a good point, Jordy, that in a race situation, when your heart rate is elevated it's not really from the swim. If you looked at most people's swim, their heart rate should be reasonably controlled if they've executed well. The heart rate comes from the exit from the water to the bike. That feeling of anxiety, I've got to get to my bike quick, I've got to transition quick, I've got to run fast. In our notes in our training and our advice to our athletes for race day is not to do that, is to be calm but efficient. You don't want people sprinting from the water and I see this every race. People are literally sprinting. And so they are burning a huge match. We talk about executing on the bike and run, but what about executing your transition properly? And so that's where the heart rate's spiking. So you need to be more calmer and give up 10 or 15 seconds or 20 seconds in an Ironman. It's nothing if you just cruise from the water to your bike rack and stay calm and keep your heart rate down and just be efficiently quick, getting your gear off, the wetsuit off, getting your goggles and cap off. And half of it should be done as you're running from the water to the bike rack. So you should have your wetsuit at your hips. You should have your goggles and your cap in your hand. So when you get to transition, all you've got to do is pull the wetsuit down from your hips down. And then just try not to panic. Try to keep yourself calm and grab your helmet, grab your nutrition, and then grab your bike, and not sprint with your bike to the bike mount. You should be just relaxed. And I've got thousands of people sprinting past me. I know that's because I can't run very fast, but I'm also just trying to maintain a relaxed feeling. And then I stand on that mount when I'm watching races, and I see athletes sprinting out of their seat in the first 2 or 3 minutes. That's a reason why your heart rate's high as well, because you've just done this panic from the minute you left the swim to getting on the bike. And look, the only people who should think like that are the people who are trying to win the race. But even those people, I would advise them not to do that. You're in an endurance event. We've talked about not spiking your heart rate throughout the whole day. That's the thing you're trying to prevent, is every time you burn a match, you're spiking your heart rate, which is going to burn the fuel quicker, which is going to bring more fatigue to you so you can't run or ride better. So let yourself settle in for the first 2 or 3 minutes. Do the complete opposite. Don't sprint when you get on the bike out of transition. Give yourself 2 or 3 minutes to build your legs from horizontal in the water to now using your legs on the bike. It's a big shock from exercising with your upper body and then jumping on the bike. So I think the question is a really good one. So it's a bit 3-part though. You've got to try to keep your heart rate down the whole time. That's the main thing. So practicing that is, yes, something we would advise if you had that availability logistically.
We do get a lot of, especially beginner triathletes who haven't raced as much, to do mock sprints or mock Olympic, where we get them to go practice the distance in the water, then ride, then run. And even then, though, we find that such a struggle because, often if you're riding at first light in the morning, by the time you get out of the swim and let's say you park your car somewhere and have your bike in the car and then go do the ride leg, you might be running into traffic straight away because it's already later in the day. And we often start our rides early to avoid as much traffic as possible. And so a ride run is more ideal, but time-wise, if you chuck a swim in there beforehand, you end up riding into traffic, which is not ideal. It's just one part of the logistic problem. So it's definitely possible, and you can find workarounds. And if you can figure out a way to make it work, then it's definitely, as you said, Dad, is definitely a good thing to do, but it's just not always feasible. So that's it from that question. And look, we know many of you out there balance training with a heavy workload, often with physically demanding jobs, and that's why a balanced training program is key. And getting a program that you can continue to do for life is important. And when you're on the job, we know you also want a tool for life. And today's episode sponsor is Klein Tools. Klein Tools are the answer. Whether you're on site or at home, Klein Tools has been creating tools that last over 167 years. That's right, for over 167 years, Klein Tools has been refining the craft of creating tools for professionals, 120 years before the sport of triathlon existed and you started coaching, Dad. So fast forward to today, there's a reason why Klein Tools has been the most respected brand among professionals for generations. Get a tool that lasts for life. Go for Klein. It's now available in-store and online near you. You can use the specific link in our description to access their online Amazon store. And on that note, let's get into the 5 key habits of the best performing triathletes. Now, we're not going to use the C word because that's a given. Okay. And the C word is consistency. We promise we're not going to say that in the 5 key habits because that is just an absolute given of the best performing triathletes. It's probably the number 1 trait. We can move straight past that. We're going to go straight into why our motto is our motto. And the first key habit is the planning part of the process. Explain why we start with planning and why that is one of the most important habits of a high-performing athlete.
But there's so much detail that you should be going into when you're beginning to plan your year. And everybody has the ability to adapt that plan to whatever's happening in their world socially, with their family and with their work. And that's how the plan should be structured. What races, what events, what fitness, what level, what's my goal? What am I trying to achieve in the next 3 years, 5 years, even, 10-year plan? What am I trying to achieve here? And work yourself backwards from wherever you want to start. And make sure in that plan that you are including things like having fun and social things that are going to happen, like a trip somewhere or or some functions or some birthdays, or, you need to put everything into that plan. And if you don't, you're going to find yourself with periods where you've planned to do some big block of training, and it turns out that you actually don't have the access to a bike or a pool, and that's why you have to take into consideration and sit down with a calendar and work out, what are the races I want to do? Where's my A race? What are my B races and C races? Where are my holidays? What's work looking like in January through to December? I just really think that phase gets overlooked a lot, and I really want to make it clear to everybody that if you don't sit down and do this with a calendar and select events that are going to fit in with your lifestyle, and that comes to the next point, which is picking events that suit you. Not just ones that you have been at the pub with your mates saying, "Oh, I'm going to do that next Ironman," and everybody agrees. Don't be that person. Don't be that sheep. You need to pick an event that suits you and your family and your lifestyle. And don't pick an Ironman if you haven't done the preparation. Don't pick a half Ironman if your longest ride is an hour. Don't pick something that's going to be in the next 3 months if you haven't got the preparation right. So the planning is all about picking the right races that suit you. And if you're not an endurance athlete, but that's what you want to be, that's okay. But that's part of the planning. Give yourself enough time and start your program straight away. Don't say, "Oh, the race isn't for another year. I can relax with not getting a program till 6 months out." That is so bad an idea. You need, imagine it when you stand on the beach 12 months and you think, "Oh, far out, I've just learnt so much in the last 6 months on this program. Imagine if I'd been on the program for 12 months instead of waiting 6 months." That's the sort of thing that you need to think about, is getting to learn as quickly as you can the things that are going to make that big day that you joined the program for to be as successful as you want. And all those case studies that we show you, the one simple thing a lot of those athletes are doing is they're starting with a really good plan. And we do that in the interview. We sort of say, what do you want to do? Why do you want to be a part of this program? What's your plan in your mind for the long term? Are you just doing a one-off event in 12 weeks? And we're not really interested in that type of athlete. We want someone who's going to be in this to learn about their own improvement and understand how their body works, and that's all part of the planning. And once we test you, we can see what type of an athlete you are and where the weaknesses are. Do you need more zone 2 work? Have you not got enough endurance in your body for an endurance athlete? Do you need some more bike sessions compared to you're a really good runner or a swimmer? Or are you a bad swimmer? We need to really hone in on your technique. Or have you not done much running? Therefore, we don't give you a lot of high intensity running. We just get your body used to the load that the running takes. So this is all part of the planning and working out who you are and what you need, and fitting that. I don't want to say that people shouldn't be doing endurance events if they're not. The predisposition isn't for that. I think anybody can do anything as long as you give yourself enough time, and that's where the planning part comes into it. And sure, we get people who leave the planning, and that happens in life, doesn't it? People plan poorly, but they still want to, rock up for an event, and you can't stop that. But we're trying to spread the word that be forward thinking, and you'll have a so much better outcome.
Yeah, one simple example is the conversation that we have with athletes will go something like, "What's your A race goal?" Okay, let's say it's this 70.3 in 18 weeks time. What's your longest run at the moment? Probably about 50 minutes to an hour. Okay, so between now and 18 or 20 weeks time, do we have enough time there to build up your long run from 1 hour to the 2-ish or plus hours that you need for a 70.3? And how much is your total weekly running volume right now? It's 10 to 25 kilometers a week. Do we have enough time to safely build that to a sustainable level where you can get the frequency and volume you need in plus your long run? And if the answer is yes, then that's what forward planning is all about. We've got a good plan in place. Yes, this is achievable. But if you came to us and wanted to do an Ironman or a marathon, but you only had 18 weeks and your longest run was was 50 minutes, or you're only running 15K a week, then we start going, geez, if we're going to, increase the volume by 10% each week, we're really pushing it to get you to the 3-hour required runs that you need. You're only going to get there about in the last month or 6 weeks out from the race. And we need to be there 12 weeks out, so then you can start really doing some specific marathon prep work. So we actually need a little bit more time. So that's just an example of how the conversations go with really specific planning and thinking. And it ends up being once an athlete does their A race, or we're looking to plan the next year, it ends up being a half-hour conversation where they go away and they look at some races on the calendar and they come back to us and they go, I'm thinking this, this, and this. And they need some objective point of view to go, whoa, you've just picked 3 70.3s within 10 weeks without realizing it, or a 70.3 and a marathon, and at a sprint distance, all within 10 weeks. They're 3 very different sports. That's actually not going to work. And so that planning part of the process is just so important to get right. And you hear Olympians talk about this all the time, is that they plan out their full season, which races they're aiming for, which C races, B races, all the way leading up to peak for their A race for the entire year. It's so meticulously planned out. And I think it's, if you're going to be spending the time doing the training, and we focus a lot on the training, but you need to have this planned out far in advance so you know what's coming up.
Yeah, and there's some great examples on the world tour level with the cyclists. All of the key general classification riders, the GC riders, are selecting what events and what tours they're going to do, whether they do the Vuelta, the Giro, or the Tour de France. And I'm sure other world tour riders are looking at what the best guys are doing and maybe selecting races that are avoiding the best riders. And if, Pogacar is going to do, and he could do all 3 tours and probably win them. But a lot of the riders would be going, well, he's doing the Tour and he's doing the Vuelta. Maybe I'll try the Giro. And they're things that you should take into consideration. And that's not avoiding, but that's good planning, because you want to give yourself the best opportunity to do well. And you don't have to compete against the best athletes all the time. There's other ways of enjoying the sport by going to events where you have an opportunity to do a lot better. And that's not to say that you shouldn't go into events where you've got no chance of winning. That's not what I'm saying. When you go to an event, everybody's got equal chance of winning. And then I look at, I did actually, it's funny, you've just, Cam Worth's program was put up the other day, and I looked at it and I just started laughing.
It's a cool thing that the pro triathletes have been doing because of the T100 series and the Ironman series. A lot of them are releasing their calendars and going, here's what I'm aiming for, here's my races. And yeah, Cam Worth came out and he's entered every single Ironman race on the calendar.
And I reckon, Jordy, I was about to say before we talked about Cam, and I love Cam. He is one of my all-time favourite athletes. I absolutely love his versatility and his ability to be a pro tour rider and a triathlete professional. I just think that's brilliant. But I was about to say, if you've been on a campaign with us to your first A race, and it was a 10-month campaign, and then the next year you could plan differently because you're already been on the program for a year. You would be able to cope with tighter races, with less time in between, because you've got this bank of fitness in your body that allows you to do this. And we always say a lot, where athletes are saying this back to me now, oh, it's so good, Gerard, I'm in my 2nd and 3rd year and I am stepping up my level, and I'm doing the same program, same consistency, and yet I am still improving, and I'm taking leaps in the 2nd and 3rd year compared to where I got really good improvement in the first 8 to 12 weeks, and then I started to get less improvement, but now I'm jumping again. And that's that 2 to 3 years of fitness in your bank. And I was about to say with Cam Worth, that's years of training, and his body can cope with that, maybe. And but if any other athlete tried to do that, I would be saying, no way, that's too much. That's way too many races. But there are exceptions to every rule. And the example I'm giving you is guys we've had for 6 or 7 years, can do back-to-back races because their body can cope with the strain and the stress of the event and recover quickly because they've got this fantastic base where they've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, and it's a great example to really point out that some people are outliers, and Cam Worth is an outlier, and we don't know if he's going to handle that race load. That is pretty extreme, especially when we saw last year how many athletes felt overtrained by the end of the year with a 7 or 8 race calendar, not a 13 or 15.
And remember how well Cam raced at Ironman, George. So that's he did handle it well, and we've got to put that point in. He was one of the few people. He was flying it at Kona. That was outstanding, and he raced a lot.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that the tour riders, the cycling tour riders, the Tour de France, they're outliers in themselves, because you ask anyone to ride 21 days in a row at a TSS of over 200, max racing every single day is like its own day stage race. It's because the stakes are so high for a stage win. There's no easy days there, and you give that, if you wrote that as a program for anyone, it would be absolute insanity. Yet their bodies can cope with it, and they suffer afterwards for sure, and they suffer through it. But their bodies do adapt, and so there are some outliers that do adapt to that. But we have gone a little bit off track with the planning process, but they're the extreme ends of it, and that's what can work for you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, I just think planning, it just gets overlooked so much, and it's kind of, if you have the wrong plan, it's like building a house with the wrong plan. It's, there will be problems down the track, and that's why you got to get this right at the start.
Yeah. And that takes us to the next most important habit to get right, and that's the preparation. That's actually the work. That is the training. And now that seems obvious, but when we talk about planning and then preparing, you have a bit of a different take on this. Of course, you've got to do the session, you've got to do the work, but what does preparation mean to you, and why is this such an important habit to get right?
Well, I think everybody thinks about training in a different way, in a different light, and if you try to be like we're pushing so much on our podcast for the last 4 years, is not to be extreme in anything, in any behavior. The less extreme you are with overtraining, and the less extreme you are with undertraining, and that will come through on race day as well. If you're racing really high power and then low power, that's actually a good analogy of life. You need not to do that to get the success you want. So training, the preparation part of training is basically you just turning up each day and making sure that you're ticking off the sessions, and you're not doing these hero sessions that are going to cause you to actually sabotage your own program. Because every time you train outside of the ranges, it has an effect. It has a consequence. And the consequence could be that the next day you can't train, or the next day after that you're still struggling and you can't. 2 days later it could be a high intensity session that you're meant to be doing, but you can't hit the numbers. And it's because you're way above the numbers 2 days prior. So the preparation part is the training, but it's actually you taking responsibility for every day and just staying super disciplined. And it sounds boring, but as you and I have interviewed a lot of professionals over the journey of this last 4 years, and the one thing they say to us, you and I say, "Oh, what do you think you can put this down to? Why is your form so great at the moment?" And they would say "Oh, there's nothing really outstanding. I've just done the work. I've just stayed in my lane and done the work, and I've had no interruptions." And I saw the interview with Ingebrigtsen 2 weeks ago when he just broke the world indoor mile record. And the interviewer was saying to him, what have you done differently, Jakob, compared to other years? Why are you all of a sudden in great form? And his answer was, it was almost like, to me, it was like I knew what he was going to say. He's going, "I've just had no interruptions. I've had the best training block ever coming into this season. Normally I have at the end of the last season, I had some little niggles that were preventing me from training consistently. And I've had the best lead up into this winter racing season, because the winter indoor track season is huge in Europe. So they have the summer track season, and they have a little break in between summer and winter through the autumn, where they're back out training and doing their volume. And he just had no interruptions through that period. He was training the house down, and he was loving the fact that he didn't miss any sessions. And he said, I've never been in this form for a long time because I've always had interruptions to my training. And that is part of the preparation, is you staying on the training track, not being injured and not having to take 3-4 days off here or 2 weeks off there and you get sick, or being prepared properly to get the right sleep, eat the right nutrition, do the training only in the ranges that's set, and you will continue to slowly improve. And then when you come to your race, like as Ingebrigtsen as an example, he didn't know where his form was, to be fair. He said that in the interview, and he said, I just felt great. And I was able to train well. And the reason is because I just prepared so well during the last 8 weeks. It's the best preparation I've done for a long time. And so, and don't forget our theory of, doing this for 8 or 10 years, each year you've got this fitness bank that when it's uninterrupted, you can step up to the level that you want to. And I think that's part of the preparation sentence is it's great to have the right training program, and that's so important. But if you don't actually turn up each day and do that program, the program's almost useless.
Yeah. We talk about there's the sessions themselves which need to get done and done, with quality, and you subtly mentioned before not overdoing it or underdoing it. That's not what the program's about. The program's there. Do the program in the set ranges, because when you overdo it, that's when you put yourself into a hole. And if you underdo it, you're just doing yourself a little bit of a disservice. So, doing the actual training, but then taking responsibility for every part of that preparation around the training. And we talk about a lot of little factors in this, but that's planning the week ahead, looking at all your sessions and going, where do I fit this in? What time is best for me to do this? What course am I going to do this on? What's the weather looking like? Am I going to be indoor or outdoor? The night before your session, if you have to get up at the crack of dawn, do you have everything laid out? Do you have all your equipment out so it's very easy for you to get up in the morning and get it done? Do you have contingencies where if something goes wrong, then you can still get the session done? Are you organized enough to just make sure that you're always charging your bike regularly, and you're charging your power meters, and you're charging your lights, and you've got your nutrition organized, like you said, and you've got all your fuel there, so you're not going to bonk on an endurance ride because you forgot your fuel or something. There's all these little things that you have to stay organized as an athlete to make sure that you're as prepared as possible, and those little habits really do add up to getting the result you need come race day, because you've been practicing this preparation every single day and every single week in your training.
Yeah, and making sure, like, sometimes I use an old alarm clock that's plugged into the wall with power, and I could just put my alarm on my phone. But if the power goes out during the night, which happens a lot these days, I would sleep in if I'm meant to be up at 5 to go and meet my venue starting time at 6 a.m. So I make sure that I've got two things happening. The phone alarm and the clock. The clock alarm is going to buzz next to my ear when it's time to get up. So that's part of the preparation. Preparing for the training session. The training session is really important. How well you perform that. But if you're not thinking about being organised, and that's part of the discipline too. How much sleep do I need for the next 3 or 4 days? And if I'm making this mistake myself, going to bed too late is going to put you under pressure for the training session. And that's poor preparation, because your fatigue levels are too high to execute. And you end up digging yourself a little mini hole. So the preparation part is equally as important as actually the performing part. So the planning, getting that right, and then preparing for the training session. No, we skim over a lot of it. Let's dig in. Do you know what you're doing tomorrow morning? What session is it? Am I doing 5-minute bike efforts on a hill? Am I doing threshold? Am I doing zone 2? Am I doing recovery? What are my ranges that I'm supposed to be riding at? What's my cadence I'm supposed? Have you looked at any of that data the night before? Or are you just going to wake up and open it up and go, lucky dip, or what is it today? That's really poor preparation. And not knowing your own numbers, what is your range to be riding at? If something goes wrong with the technology and you're just stuck with the power meter on your bike computer, if you know what your ranges are, that shouldn't even be a problem to you. You should be able to say, look, I'm doing these 5-minute efforts. My range is 200 to 215. As long as I'm in that range, and my cadence is 60 to 75, there's my session in my head. And that's part of you knowing and preparing for what's coming up. I'm going to do 2-minute hill repeats. I am in a place where there is no hill. I am in there is just not a hill anywhere. So I'm better off jumping into a gym and grabbing a treadmill and putting it on an incline than going training outside. That's what I'm talking about with preparation. Think about the logistics of, can you do the session? And you talked about course selection. That's what preparation is. Understanding where you are in the world, and you could be moving from place to place. We have so many athletes who travel. On a Monday, they could be in one state or one country, and on the Friday, they could be in another country. And I've got this guy, Jeff, he is the ultimate in preparation. I love the way he does it. He travels between Australia, England, and America. And he does that pretty much over a period of a month. He would be in all three of those countries every month. And he's just so organized. He can tell me where he is, what time his flights are, and what he can do that day. And he travels with a bike everywhere. He travels with his own bike and his own trainer. That's how organized this guy is. He has never missed a session, and he is the most traveled athlete that I coach. He has never missed sessions. And it would be an illness, and I know his son had a skiing accident. That would be a reason why he would be missing a session. I just think he epitomizes what it takes to be prepared for a training program.
So we call it the 3 Ps for a reason, and that's why these things are the most important habits for athletes. And so the first one is plan, second one is prepare, and the last one is perform. And actually for today, we have the 5 key habits. We have 4 Ps, and we want to give you an extra one. But the third one is perform. And so plan, prepare, perform is our motto. And so we've talked about it so far in terms of a bit of a macro scale. Plan your whole training year, do the training, and perform on race day. But plan, prepare, perform applies for the whole training week. Plan your week ahead, prepare everything you need for the week, and perform throughout the whole week. And it applies to each individual training session. Plan this specific training session, what you said about the numbers. Prepare for the training session, execute those numbers, perform and execute properly. And so performance is all about that word, execute. And all the training in the world doesn't matter if you get to race day and you don't execute the race plan. You don't execute to what you should. And we just say all the time that it's still an underrated part. Everyone does the training. They do so much work in preparation, and they train for 6 months or 12 months for a half Ironman or Ironman, and then don't take the performance and the execution of the race plan seriously enough, and don't get the result they deserve because they haven't done that, and they don't concentrate on their execution. We spoke about that with 3 peaks. And you've just thrown essentially 6 to 12 months worth of work a little bit out the window, because you didn't realize that the training on its own isn't enough. That's not going to get you a result on race day. It's the execution of your ability that gets you the result on race day.
We talk a lot about making sure that you have done all those things well. You have practiced in your training sessions what power and what ranges you should be at, what pace you should be running at, and what swim pace you should be swimming at. We talk about that. That's what the practice days are. Our training sessions are practice days, and we bring it back the other way. We say everything that happens on race day, we want to practice in training. So if you ride a smart trainer on race day in a triathlon, then we would get you to train on a smart trainer using the power meter from a smart trainer. But it doesn't happen that way. We ride an actual bike in the race outside. And so we're adamant that you shouldn't be doing anything different that's going to happen on race day. So why would you do all this planning and preparation and then come to race day and throw everything that you've done in your training out the window and not follow the planning and the preparation part? And so race day is your chance to go out and just execute everything you've done in training. And to have this expectation that people have, the performance side of it, I will perform way better than I have in my training. That's just not true. That hardly ever, there are outliers who can do massive PBs. We're not denying that, and we're not saying we hope that's what happens. But the majority of time in an endurance sport, you're trying to emulate where your current form is, and hopefully it's more than what it was 6 months ago. So that should be an improvement in itself, that you've done a PB from 6 months ago. But your form and your most recent training sessions, that's where you should be executing. And hopefully you've executed so well that by the end of if you're in a triathlon, you can come home really strong in the run and really get another PB. And if you're in a marathon, you can take more risks at the 36k mark rather than just existing to the 42k mark. You can actually run faster. Or if you're in a bike race where you're in a time trial, you can actually lift the power from what your ranges should be at the end when you can just empty the tank. They're things we're talking about in terms of execution, but the performance should be replicating what you've done in training on race day and hoping for maybe a % improvement. And people just have the wrong idea about, it's race day, everything I've been doing in training, that doesn't matter. That's just training. Now I'm going to be 15% better than I was in training. And that's a huge mistake. There are outliers that can prove that wrong. But in general, we're talking about that just doesn't and wouldn't happen.
Yeah, guess what? Execution is a habit. it's literally a habit. It's something that you practice. If you don't practice it as a habit, it's not going to happen on race day. And we talk all the time to our athletes about when you're doing a 1 minute effort and it tells you to ride at 105% of your FTP, you really want to practice riding 105% of your FTP for 1 minute. And then when you've got a 5 minute effort at 95% or 98%, you want to practice that. Because if you don't do it in the 1 minute effort, you can't do it for 5 minutes. If you can't do it for 5 minutes, you're not going to do it in your 10 minute or 20 minute threshold efforts. If you can't do it in that, you're not going to do it in your 1 hour sub threshold efforts. And then if you can't do that, you can't get to race day and ride for 2.5 hours or 3 hours at your goal power because you haven't practiced all the way through in training. So we really, really try and remind athletes of that, because you look at any sport and Steph Curry, the greatest shooter in NBA history, makes 300 to 500 shots per day in practice, sinks 300 to 500 shots. He doesn't leave the court until he does. And so that's why he can, in the highest stakes match of an NBA finals or a gold medal match in the Olympics, he can just get the ball and throw it up in a split second and know it's going in because he's just practiced that execution over and over. If you're not going to practice it, you can't just expect to go on the court and get it in. Any athlete that we see, what we see them doing on the world stage at the highest level in the Olympic final or the World Cup final or anything, we see the result of what they've practiced every single day in training. We don't see the result of them practicing a little bit, but then just fluking it on race day. That when they get it in, that is years and years of practice execution, what they're finally getting to show the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, you can relate that to repetition running sessions, strength efforts on the bike, 400-meter swim efforts, just repeating the same thing over and over again. So when it comes to race day, all you're doing is you've already got your plan and you're well prepared. You've just got to go out there and perform, or in other words, execute.
Yep. And
we just can't stress that they don't go single-handedly. All of those three things intertwine with each other. And if you leave one of those out, you're going to be, you're going to not get the result that you want. And that's kind of the message. And look, it sounds like we're really banging on about this, but it is so true that get one of those things wrong. And if you use that analogy of the triangle, where if you don't get the planning and you do the performing and the preparation really well, but you've actually got the wrong event, then it's a really poor outcome. Or if you plan an event and you don't do any of the preparation, but and you find you can't perform properly, every time you do it, if all three things aren't right, then something's going to make it a catastrophe in the end.
So that's plan, prepare, perform. That is our Tribolo motto. And the extra P that we put in that is post-race analysis. And we speak about this a bit, but you've got to review the race, because otherwise you're not going to get any feedback about how you actually went. But it's not just the race that you review. It should be every single training session and every training block that you review, and review yourself in your testing weeks. And when you do that constant post-race or session or test analysis, you're actually getting feedback as to what went right, what went wrong, and what you need to focus on for the next block. If you're not doing that, if you're just doing the performance and not analyzing it, you're not getting any feedback, and you're not going to make any changes that are actually going to get you better.
And normally, after your event, it's a really good opportunity for you when it's really in your mind within the first 24 hours after your event. You get a clear understanding in your own mind of where you were strong and where you were weak. And you should be taking notes about that. I felt today that my run let me down. I just didn't seem to be strong enough in the back end. And then you would have a discussion. Maybe we need some more longer periods of hill repeats. Maybe I hadn't done enough hill repeats in my running. Maybe I hadn't done those long runs in enough hills, which is two different sessions, hill repeats compared to the endurance run with hills. Maybe I just hadn't done enough running. And you would have to look at all of these things. That's what the post-race analysis is for. If you felt like, you're riding, and we looked at the data and you spent too much time outside the ranges, we'd have to go into the race and see, was the race course really undulating that caused that? Or was there packs in the race? We'd have to find out all these reasons so we can actually look at, do we need to practice this staying in the ranges more? And that's what we concentrate on our next block of training. So the post-race analysis is a really great thing to do, because it gives you feedback instantly about your performance, and also gives you feedback about how well you prepared yourself. And if you feel like you lacked some preparation because of the way you performed, then you need to talk about that. And you need to change something in the next block of training. And that's the beauty of it. What are the things you did well? I actually swam well this time. Great. Let's keep the constant there. Let's just do what we've been doing there. I don't think I ran so well. Let's have a little look at that. Let's change it up a bit. We want to not just, keep doing the same training program if it's not working the way we want it to. I had the example on the weekend, even though Joe Spano, we have talked about on the podcast before, he won his age group at peaks by 5 or 6 minutes. And, most people would be pretty satisfied with that. But Joe and I had a bit of a discussion about how well we think we prepared for peaks and what are the sessions. And he was sort of saying, well, I trust the process and I know we've been working together for 7 or 8 years. And I just know that you care about where I'm at in every part of the period of training that we're in. And I am really on board with whatever we're doing. And I was almost before the race questioning whether I'd done enough long hills for this event. And then after I'd had a discussion with him for 5 minutes about what we'd done in October, November, December, where we'd done, a lot of big hill training sessions. That was our period to be prepared for a big race in December and the next race, which was going to be in March. And so we needed to shift from that long endurance hill stuff to more intensity with endurance from the next period, which is the January, February period, the next 8 weeks. And in that time, we had a training camp for January and we had a training camp for November. So when I explained that to him, he was really clear that, I felt like we hadn't done a lot of hills, but in actual fact, we had done a lot of hills, but it was just the way we'd done it. And that's good for athletes to ask those questions. And halfway through the race, he's sort of almost answering his question going, I feel fantastic. I'm not even questioning because he was, like every athlete, you question everything before a race. You are so worried about how prepared you are. You just, that's one of the things that we want to appease in our actual athletes that we coach. That's why we have that pre-race meeting and to settle their nerves and be honest with the preparation they've done, and then we're going to be honest with their race plan based on the preparation. And that takes away a lot of anxiety. And if you've trained the house down, you should be so confident. But if you've trained 75%, then you have to have a race strategy that's based around that. If you've trained 50%, then you have to be super more conservative. And you can't just be gung-ho. You've got to, and that's what the good athletes, and I'm not talking about the elite. I'm talking about, we've got guys like Dane Ruff in our program who's been doing it for 2 or 3 years now. The last race, he flew past me on the bike. And when he first joined us, I was probably 6 k's an hour faster than him. And in that time, he has improved that much. It was like a shock because not many people in races pass me, but to see a fellow Trivelo athlete fly past me, I was more excited about what he was doing than concentrating on my event. It was fantastic. And I just thought, wow, this works when people, he's super consistent with everything he does. And, he's our best performing athlete and most improved athlete over a long period of time. And each race, each 6 months, each year, he just continues to improve. And he's just getting faster and faster. He's getting older, but he's getting faster. And that's a great example of, we're not talking about elite. We're talking about people who get the plan, prepare, perform, post-race analysis, get all that stuff right, turn up each day, just do what has to happen, stay consistent, and tick off the numbers, stay in their ranges, and do things in training and execute on race day. They're the ones who are getting the results. They're the ones who are outperforming the people who should perform better. And you just stay in your lane and you watch how well you'll each day, week, month, year, just be a better athlete.
It's so rewarding to get the post-race analysis done when you do well, but it's just as important when you don't do well. But most importantly, it's an accurate post-race analysis. That's where a coach can really help, because sometimes you can finish a race and you can kind of throw everything out and go, the whole training was crap, the preparation was crap, and we've all been there, and I need to drastically change something. There's a pro athlete we know that does this every single time, and I won't mention his name, but you don't. You just sometimes you have to make minute changes, and that's all it is. So The last thing we want to touch on, the last point and habit of highly successful athletes is actually my favorite quote. And it's, the thing about remarkable people is that they do quite unremarkable things repeatedly, day in and day out. And that's what we were talking about before with, when we ask an athlete after a great race, what was the difference? And they say, well, I just trained consistent for 3 years. I just didn't get sick. I just didn't get injured. And the compounding effect is true for anything in life, but it's so true for training. It's no hero sessions. It's just day after day, week after week, year after year. If you can just get that compounding effect and just not miss, that will add up to a remarkably higher result and better result than doing anything crazy or remarkable or trying to do a hero session or trying to do something crazy different. That's not what it takes. It just takes unremarkable, sometimes boring training sessions over and over to get the remarkable result for yourself.
Yeah, and look, I just had a funny conversation during the week with I'm not sure how to put this, but the athlete was commenting on that the session, they didn't feel like they were outside on the road, and they really enjoyed the session because they were going from a point down to a point, and the scenery was a really good part of the world. The water was beside them. They felt like they were on a destination ride, and I was just shocked. It really shocked my world. When I'm doing these structured training sessions for a race, I wouldn't even know what scenery is. I have no idea. I know roughly where I am in terms of streets and areas. All I'm looking at is this a rise? Should I change gears here? Am I a little bit too high in the power? Should I just adjust my pressure here? How's my heart rate? What's my cadence doing? How's my average speed? And I wouldn't have a clue where I am on the road. I know basically where I am. I'm getting to the end of this section or this segment, but it's just a different way of thinking. And people have said to me over the journey, "Oh, it's so boring doing those long rides." I'm just not bored at all. I am so focused on exactly what should be happening, and it goes so quickly because I'm actually in the session. I think you've got the wrong approach if you're let's take the Steph Curry example. If you're just staying after the training session to hone your free throws, yeah.
The tongue twister. Yeah.
Free throw level, free throw level. Yeah. You're really trying to really concentrate, and if you're missing 15 and 20 and you're just sort of bouncing the ball around and throwing it up and it misses, you're not actually doing it properly. And by thinking about, I have to start again if I miss, that's going to take a different mindset. That, okay, I have to do 100 in a row, but if I get to 60 and I miss one, I have to start again. That's going to put a whole new concept of thought process. And that's the way I'm kind of running or riding or swimming, is I'm in the moment all the time. So I think that that concept of just doing the basics can be boring, yes, but boy, is the outcome great, because you are concentrating on being in the moment, and that's what you should be doing on race day. So, get your venue right, and look, it might be a beautiful place in the world to ride, but that's not the session today. There may be another session where you're just riding zone 1, zone 2, where you can actually take in the beautiful scenery and smell the roses, sort of thing. That's important to do. I'm saying when you're in a session that's got structure for a purpose, you should be only focusing on, I've got to avoid these cars that are on the road with me and the pedestrians, but I've got to concentrate on my pedaling technique, my power that I'm riding. Where are the undulations? Where should I be putting pressure down? And they're the things that I think that's that fifth thing, that, training properly and not just going through the motions.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's a great way to finish. I think even on a zone 2 ride, I have people ask me all the time, what do you think about for 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours on the bike? What are you thinking about the whole time? And I say, to be honest, a lot of the time, not much. My thought process is, what's my power? What's my cadence? What's the gradient? What's the next part of the road? Because the road is changing. It's 1%, then down 2%, then up 3%. And what gear am I in? I'm flicking the gears constantly. We speak about how we flick the gears hundreds and hundreds of times per session and per long ride. based on the ever-changing gradient and terrain you're on. And that's not true for every session. Some sessions you're riding with a friend and you're chatting away and you're not even focused on your gear or your pressure on the pedals. Or sometimes you are in a really relaxed ride where you are looking around, like you said, and smelling the roses and not worrying about it. But most of the time, you're practicing with purpose. And even on a 3-hour to 4-hour zone 2 ride where seemingly, quote unquote, nothing is supposed to happen, you're just constantly concentrating on that pressure on the pedals. And that's the difference between training well and shooting those free throws with a purpose, or just shooting them not caring if they actually go in or not.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And I know it sounds serious, and if it is serious that what you're doing, you've entered a serious event, a marathon or an epic bike ride like Three Peaks or an Ironman or a 70.3. You've just got to, when you are out there, you've got to act like you're a professional and do the thing properly, and then have fun afterwards, have fun before. But when you're in the moment, concentrate, and that's part of the discipline of success.
Great way to finish this episode. We hope you've enjoyed it as always. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you.